I'm Scott Klinker. I head the 3D design program, and thanks for coming out. We have a very special event tonight, the annual Knoll Lecture in Design. And before I introduce the speaker, a few words about the event and its sponsor. This lecture on design was established in 2003 to present a prominent designer at the Academy through a public lecture and a visit with the students in the 3D department. Knoll is recognized internationally as a manufacturer of workplace and residential furnishings and a leader in sustainable design. Knoll has roots at Cranbrook. Florence Knoll, co-founder of the company with her husband Hans Knoll, studied at both Kingswood School and the Academy. An impressive list of Cranbrook designers have worked with Knoll, including Eero Saarinen, Harry Bertoya, Ralph Rapson, Marianne Stringell, Michael McCoy, Hani Rashid, and most recently, Masamichi Urugawa of Antenna Design. On behalf of the Academy, I want to thank Knoll for keeping a strong connection with Cranbrook and for providing this opportunity to bring top designers here to give a public lecture and to speak with our students. Before I introduce our speaker, please help me to thank Knoll for their support. Tonight's speaker is designer Brian Graham, who is visiting from his home base in San Francisco. I was aware of Brian's design work before I met him because his name was on so many of the projects, that I admire. I had the pleasure of meeting Brian several years ago through mutual friends, and especially since he has worked for Knoll, he seemed to be a perfect fit for our annual Knoll Lecture. He is the founder and creative director of Graham Design, a studio specializing in contemporary furniture and related products for the workplace and healthcare markets. With over 30 years of experience in design, Brian's strategic approach combines planning, research, and creativity to deliver solutions that meet his manufacturing partners' needs and expectations. His work has garnered awards and recognition from numerous prestigious professional organizations in both interior design, industrial design, and architecture. His mission is to create functional, beautiful, and sustainable products, enhancing people's quality of life. Brian advocates and advises the design industry, collaborating with leading manufacturers, associations, and publications to promote the value and impact of design. He actively engages with the larger design community to champion a deeper understanding of design's significance in contemporary culture, including participating in design talks like tonight, industry panels, podcasts, and filmed media. Our format today will be to have Brian give us a brief introduction to his body of work. Then we'll switch to a conversation format to learn more about Brian's ideas, followed by an audience Q&A as time allows. Brian has already spent a full day with our students in the studio, so I hope he's not too talked out yet. But we're very grateful to Brian for making the trip to share his insights with us today. So please help me to welcome Brian Graham.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. Boy, this Brian Graham guy sounds pretty impressive. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Thanks, everybody, for coming out this evening. I'm incredibly honored to be here. It's my first visit to Cranbrook, and today was just a wonderful sort of opportunity to come here to the cradle of modernism that we know here in America and to work with the students. So thanks for hosting me and having me. Oh, good, this is the right slideshow. So what I'm going to talk about just briefly here is interior design and furniture design. So I'm an interior designer by training. I went to Cal State Long Beach in my hometown of Southern California in Long Beach. Got an interior design degree, went to work first for Gensler and Associates in Century City. When Gensler was only 500 people total, I think they're around 7,000 now. So when I left, they really just took off. Feel free to laugh at any of these lame jokes. I appreciate it. Then I started my own design studio for a few years with my good friend and best man at my wedding, John Thiel. And it just happened that our wives were also working at Knoll as managers and reps at the time. So just kind of funny that ultimately I came back to work with Knoll. And then I broke off on my own, and actually I'm celebrating my 25th year of being on my own. I think I'm going to get some of those pens and gold seals that these guys keep giving me that say, 25 years or something. I give them out. So a little background. This is when I had more hair in the 90s doing a promotional gig with the folks at Gensler. Gensler was a great finishing school for me. I didn't really realize how little I knew coming out of school until I went to work at Gensler. They had the level of sophistication and execution that really allowed me to learn and to grow. And I got to work on some really great projects for some great clients, law firms, Apple Computer. But the one that really resonated for me was a small little showroom in Los Angeles called Motto. And Motto was run by Gary McAdam, who is now, he's retired, but he went on to become an amazing design force. And he had this amazing little idea for pulling together all these disparate products into this great showroom. And we got the assignment to do it. And I remember that the budget was so small that none of the principals or anybody would actually come and talk to me about the project because there was no money for them. So I got to do it all by myself. And I enjoyed it and loved it. And it kind of fueled this real interest in being able to do total design, which continues to this day. So interior design and furniture design, what does that mean? For me, when I think about furniture, I'm always thinking about applications. Right? So I'm trying to think about how interior designers use furniture to basically activate the spaces that we work with today. And so when I look at those kinds of spaces, first I look at a floor plan. So I'm looking at private spaces, I'm looking at shared spaces, support spaces. I'm looking at the dialogue that happens between enclosed space and open space. The kinds of things we're seeing now where presentation is right next to collaboration. And of course, most recently, where we're seeing things where digital and physical come together. So what are the needs of these spaces? So my advice is solve for the application. Think like an interior designer. So when I start to look at floor plans and I start to break these spaces down, I realize that the use of these spaces is really activated by the furniture. And in a lot of the work that I've done, I'm helping a lot of my manufacturing partners figure out how to implement the designs that we've come up with in the applications that designers specify. In many cases, I'm trying to combine the work that I'm proposing with other products that I have not designed. Because I understand I'm not going to do everything, so my product has to work in dialogue with their products. Now that's funny. Let's go forward. Okay, sorry. So I truly work with manufacturers as partners, and I'm really fortunate to work with some of the best brands in the industry. Having done this now, 25 years, I've been so really fortunate to be associated with all kinds of companies, and they're big and small. Every one of them is unique, every one of them is different, and every one of them presents new challenges. I'll take you through maybe quickly a few. Martin Brattrud is my longest standing manufacturing partner. I've worked with them actually before I broke out on my own. Back in 1986, I proposed some very simple lounge furniture. Now, granted, I didn't know anything about lounge furniture, but that didn't stop me. I had proposed the idea of doing some upholstered furniture, and together, working with them about every other weekend for about 6 months, we cobbled together 6 lounge chairs. They taught me everything I needed to know about upholstery, and we continue to work together today. Most recently, I've worked on some collections, some mobile communal tables. The idea of a big table like this being able to be reconfigured and movable was kind of new for them a few years ago. And once again, my product has to work in dialogue with others. These stools by my good friend Chris Adamic hopefully work well with my products. And you'll see something here that I pointed out earlier to the students. The introduction of tote hooks. Apparently, purse hooks and tote hooks are like the winning detail that you need to incorporate in your furniture. Who knew? These poofs were something that kind of was inspired by my background in sailing growing up. The idea of a buoy that's anchored to the coast, and that there's a bit of a water line that's below, that's kind of canted back, and then the buoy that's above the water line. And so that creates some really interesting aspects of it, because it actually allows your heels to kick back as you sort of steady yourself while sitting on it, and also the opportunity to introduce a contrasting fabric, which can be done in leather or really durable vinyl. And so there's a functional benefit to, hopefully, the style as well. I don't often get a chance to design sort of singular pieces. This one, called Anna Kappa from Martin Brattrud, was my latest. It really was a fairly simple sketch trying to do something that had a kind of a cant and a sculptural quality to it. But of course, the trick in that is peeling all the foam and the upholstery away to get to how it's going to be built out of plywood. And so back and forth we would go, as we typically do, to work those prototypes out. And the result, hopefully, is something that's both comfortable and distinctive, with really beautiful detailing. These guys really do a fantastic job with upholstery. And then the happy accident that comes from realizing that if we were to just take the seam for the back fabric down the center of the chair rather than the 2 quarter points, which is traditionally where it happens, then that textured fabric, if that was something that somebody specified, could wrap around almost like a collar on a neck. And then cutting it at the bias, where the corded welt is, creates this really interesting visual dynamic. And then it kind of avoids us having to seam things together in an odd way. But that was one of those things that literally didn't happen until we started playing with it physically in the factory. Working with these folks as long as I have to guard against showing them something as simple as a sketch, because they're able to nail it. I was actually able to do a sketch, then do a quick 2D drawing, and they basically nailed it on the first try. Maybe that's what happens after working with somebody for 25 years. And then most recently, I was trying to create another communal table where softness and upholstery became the expressive element, which is sort of atypical for tables. But there's also a benefit in that it does have a vertical chase to allow power and data to be concealed and distributed. And hopefully the end result is something that's just a different expression for tables. And I certainly don't do this all alone. This is part of the team of very talented creatives that help support the development and launch of all these products. Of course, I'm here, courtesy of Knoll and Cranbrook. This is probably one of my most treasured relationships. I worked for probably the better part of 11 years on 3 different collections for Knoll. It's always good when they name the collection after you. You know, you only get to do that once. So it better be Knoll. Here it was a case goods line where the emphasis was to try to create a dialogue between thick and thin panels, between the horizontal and the vertical, between the support and the supported, by literally pulling in what were the end panels on a double overhead box, 1/2 module, and offsetting the shelf from the support, created a really different dialogue than we had seen in wood furniture in quite some time. And then being able to do the kinds of things that I thought would be the best representation of Knoll's craft, concealed drawer pulls, an homage to one of my favorite architects, Richard Neutra, with the use of an extruded version of a wide flange beam as a runoff support. And then even sort of hearkening back to the kind of work that Florence Knoll did in terms of using leather as a drawer pull, but in this case we used a spinny back belting leather. And I guess I was using Zoom way before Zoom became a thing, because nobody I work with is actually where I am. I'm always talking across the country, across the world, at all the different folks that I work together with. Maybe the truest test of the work that I've done is when they ask you back to do some more. So we took a stance at this product, Ref, which has been around for 30 some odd years, maybe longer. It's kind of the bellwether of the wood case goods industry. And here I was just trying to apply, again, that sensibility to scale, to proportion, to relationships. And then taking my interior design background and suggesting that, you know, outside of the offices where the lawyers or such might be in these projects, there are paralegals, there are workstations, and typically those are millwork. Why wouldn't we just make an extension of Ref profiles to handle those pieces? And they thought that was a good idea, and we introduced it, and it turned out pretty well. Of course, it's always nice when they decide that they want to blow the doors off of the showroom sample and do it in Calicata d'Oro. Don't think we sold many of these, but it sure looks nice. And then some of the things that they really didn't think that we were going to do, it just kind of came, was a series of tables and bookcases, again, kind of from an interior designer's perspective. Look at the floor plan, right? What is it that we're doing, and what are the opportunities we're missing? Where do interior designers want to carry the look and enduring feel and warmth of wood into the rest of the space? And we just kept developing things that would do that. And then they hire a cartoonist during NeoCon, and they have fun with what you've designed. And I don't know if anybody would want a tree growing out of their communal table, but sure, why not? And lastly, of course, when your headshot is a part of this galaxy of iconic designers, it's been a good day. I've recently gotten into healthcare furniture, something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I think part of it was driven by the declining health of my parents and sort of experiencing the kind of spaces that happen as we were working together through their health challenges. And I thought that there was an opportunity to create some more modern expressions in the healthcare environment for wellness and healing. This first effort is called Flora. It's a very simple modular product. It's really designed to help make space, define space. But the idea of setting off the seat from the back and having a true clean-out element that's offset with spacers, because as you probably know, in these healthcare spaces, they really disinfect this stuff to the nth degree. And so the furniture has to be robust and durable enough to accept that. But then we got to have some expressive fun, trying to bring some other elements maybe into the wellness space that wasn't so clinical, like a formed plywood arm, which we think in sort of a senior living facility might be a new and fresh expression. And all throughout this process is a give and take, is a back and forth. So my sketchbook and my iPad become my annotation device and fuel the next round of prototypes. And upholstery is something that has become more and more important, obviously, in our market, in our place, but I think that it's become a really interesting sculptural opportunity. And so the more I get to explore the expressive qualities and potential of upholstery, the more fascinated I am with it. We were fortunate enough to win the Good Design Award. I think we mentioned this earlier. It'd have been great to have gotten the Great Design Award, but we'll take the Good Design Award. Another little archetype here, which you may or may not know, is a flop sofa. I know, I didn't know what a flop sofa was either. Is that a sofa that doesn't sell? But actually, it's where somebody can make up a bed and sleep over in a patient room. And starting to understand what that meant and trying to create, again, a very modern expression, but still packed with the sort of robust detailing and cleanability that these products demand was my challenge. And then, as any good designer, I thought, well, you know what? If we've already done most of the parts and pieces for the flop sofa, could we not just extend this into lounge chairs and seating that could live outside in the more public spaces? And we developed those. And as you work through the pandemic, when these were developed, this is kind of the vibe. Another manufacturing partner that I've become quite, I guess, embedded with is OFS out of Huntingburg, Indiana. It's a family-owned company, privately held, so they're very, very supportive of design. I first got started working with them on another case goods line called Aptos, where the idea, again, of something distinctive in terms of jewelry or accent came in the form of sort of something inspired by the Alto vase or the Eames screen as a runoff support. And then our relationship continued. They asked me to come in and do a kind of an update on a tuxedo sofa, which became a product called Rowan. And, you know, what's so funny about these, you know, you sketch things and you model things and you get all the 3D files together and you send it to them and they're terrific and they build what you draw. And then you come there and it's all wrong. Not that they made the mistake, it's just not right. And then you start to employ sophisticated materials like cardboard and tape, markers, chalk, and sort of craft this hopefully simple, clean seating product. And once they see the sales, they start to say, you know, where else can we take this aesthetic and this expression? So they asked for a very simple credenza line. And so these are really just the presentations I make, because again, it's all done through a distance. And then they really develop some nice solutions. And then the thing they didn't ask for, I said, why wouldn't we do a bookcase and do it double-sided so there's a functional aspect of display and storage on one side, and on the other side, there's a place we could do a whiteboard, maybe some sound-absorptive felt, and help the furniture define space, which seems to be more and more the case these days. The furniture now is taking over for the architecture in a lot of workplaces. Most recently, they asked me to come back and do a deeper, more relaxed Rowan. So this is something that's a little lower, a little deeper, a little softer, a little plusher. We introduced some more tufting. You wouldn't think you would take 6 iterations, Scott, to do where the tufting goes, but we did. I hope we got it right. And then one of the other things that they do, because they have this great woodworking capability, is these fantastic butcher block tops. So the idea was, can we take the butcher block, which is seen as kind of a traditional material, and can we sort of give it a sort of a modern, soft quality, and then be able to array it around different seating elements and layer these pieces. So they do this wonderful pillow edge, which is kind of this sort of soft wing shape, leading edge shape in wood, in walnut and oak and ash. It's really, really pretty. And so we can layer the tables. And then the thing they didn't ask for, it's kind of a recurring thing. I thought there was an opportunity for us to develop a signature bench out of that same material. And so that turned out, I think, really well. And it's a privilege, I have to tell you, that I've earned the trust of my manufacturing partners to take this journey, right? To take that leap of faith. We didn't ask for a bench, but you've been right so far. Let's give that a shot. And I'm very, very thankful for that opportunity. And then wrapping up with the butcher block, I also suggested we do cafe tables, dining tables. I think I showed an earlier sketch of what that study would look like. But back to purse hooks for a second. So this product at NeoCon last year won a very coveted gold award in its category for dining tables. So when I found out about this, I said, really? I mean, it's nice, but it's just a table. Oh no, Brian, the judges love that hook. So the hook was the hook. The other thing that I wanted to get involved in more with them was a wood expression for chairs. So Callie is my take on trying to do a very simple, clean, but not at all straightforward chair. This is probably one of the hardest projects I've ever tried to design because I can draw it, but to model it in 3D is extremely demanding. And they were very patient in my really terrible CAD files and could sort of make up for these wacky dings and dents and stuff that I did. But ultimately, we figured out how to make a really pretty piece. And also, they just reintroduced they just introduced a solid wood seat with a little dish in it. So again, they're being really helpful, very, very supportive of those efforts. And that's the whole family together. Also, another thing they really thought maybe they would need was a really simple stool. So this idea of just doing, again, the butcher block, but doing it in a bit of a curve. It's a great sketch, believe me, doing that, right? It's like, that's fun. But that's a really big piece of solid timber. So they said, tap the brakes, bud. Back it off. We can go this thick. So we worked probably 3 different iterations to figure out that we could do a flat bottom and still get that kind of soft cup shape in it. And I think it came out okay. But again, here I've been doing this for a long time, and you draw something, you think, yeah, that's going to be great. Oh, yeah. There's no way that we can afford to do that. So I'm constantly learning. Most recently, I got a chance to work with one of the main family members, Molly Menke, who had this idea for not a product, but more of an emotion. She and I, who were working on the bench together, she said, can you come to my office after we're finished? I said, sure. Went over there. And Molly had this I'm not going to call it a manifesto, and it wasn't a brief. It was 5 pages of what she felt was missing in the private office from a standpoint of being supportive, of sponsoring, real kind of coaching, of being able to just have a different relationship with people. Instead of somebody working across from you, working beside you was one of the quotes from her document. I didn't have any suggestions for size or shapes or price points or materials. She just felt like the private office needed a fresh expression. And so the solution is Ally. I think my original sketches were really just about layering seating and tables, providing height adjustability in a lot of areas that were expected and then maybe some areas that weren't expected, and to create more of a dialogue of shapes. It's kind of like the ancillary furniture setups that we're seeing a lot in the open office coming into the private office. So something as simple as putting a height adjustable mechanism in a coffee table allows somebody to go from having coffee to being able to work in a very straightforward and directed way. There's a lot of confusing stuff on that slide. We made sense of it all. And so what I think is so interesting about product photography these days is it used to be like our architectural photography. You didn't want any people in there, right? We just wanted to see the forms. We just want to see the purity of this. No, we got to see people now. And I think in this particular instance, it really works well because it's about the people, right? We're supporting people in a workplace. So very simple storage forms, a lot of oversailing, kind of once again revisiting this idea of upholstered drawer pulls. This one's more like a seatbelt material. And then coming up with some things that are a little weird. I had this notion, and again, this is that leap of faith that our manufacturing partners take with us, right? Is I thought, what would happen if we could have a work surface that was just enough for you to just have a touchdown space, and that there was this form, and you could tuck like a couple of coats and your backpack behind it, sort of in the shadows, and that the expressive nature of it would be this upholstered wrap. And they didn't laugh. They said sure, and they did it. And so far, it's been probably the thing that has gotten us the most attention and seems to be the thing that's driving a lot of interest, because it's maybe a new piece for the workplace. And finally, I'll wrap up with the most recent thing that I've done, which is a case goods line for a company called Qualu, which is out of Atlanta. And this was all about trying to provide patient room case goods that were straightforward, durable, but a whole range of those pieces, and trying to sort of evoke a more kind of modernized or abstracted neoclassical expression. And the materiality that they have, it's actually a molded polymer instead of wood. So it's got the look and appearance of wood, but it's very, very durable, again, for these really super robust, constantly cleaned spaces. And then trying to extend that into more utilitarian pieces like mobile carts and things. And then finally, come into some different ideas, some new hopeful archetypes that acknowledge that, if you've got a loved one in there and there's not a chair, perhaps there could be a little garage for a poof to be rolled out that you could just sit there and hold their hand. Thank you.
So Knoll is a very serious brand, but we can have fun with this, right?
This is being recorded, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. We're not going to say anything untoward or anything.
Well,
No.
Brian's known for his sense of humor, so don't hold back.
Okay, I promise.
But this is being recorded, so keep it clean.
I'll keep the swearing down to a minimum.
Okay, I have. I'm going to do my best. Anderson Cooper here.
You've got the hair.
Yeah. So I have a couple different topics from starting with interior design and industrial design and looking at some of the relationships between those two, relationships with industry, and then maybe just design culture at large. I don't know how much we're good, if we'll get through all of them, but let's play it by ear and see how it goes. So let's see here. I'm gonna. You covered a lot of stuff already, so I'm gonna have to kind of pick and choose here. How about? So I'm curious, I'm impressed by your hybridity. You're a hybrid person, between interior design and industrial design. And I know that you know a lot of people in both of those fields, and I'm curious of what you see as the different ways that they think. Like what are some of the differences between the way an interior designer thinks and the way an industrial designer thinks? Or so you're as a hybrid person, you're wearing multiple hats. So how do you think of those hats? And maybe this is just more of a matter of classification, but these are different fields and different kinds of expertise. So how do you sort those?
I think it's a really great question. And I've often thought that, because I work on my own, I should mention I want to thank Cranbrook for bringing my entire staff to this presentation. We're all here, Scott. Felt it was important for everybody to be here, I've often thought that I should probably have multiple hats over my drawing board, and then just remember, okay, what role am I playing today? Because I kind of see myself as an advocate, as an advisor, obviously a designer, sometimes design conscious, sometimes industry pundit, sometimes market intelligence officer. There's all those different roles. I think the difference between interior designers and industrial designers is industrial designers tend to think about objects and assemblies and manufacturing methodologies, which are all really, really good, and things that, quite frankly, I didn't have schooling in, right? An interior designer, I think, thinks about space, they think about relationships, they think almost like on a quasi-architectural level, right? Planning concepts and things, so the use of things in those spaces. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to straddle. I'm trying to remember that the thing that I design is going to be used in concert with other things that I probably didn't have anything to do with, and that are then going to be arrayed in ways that hopefully I understand, but I'm constantly learning from interior designers how they use the products. In fact, that's the best feedback loop I get, is to hear from interior designers who've used the product, dealers who have sold the product and serviced the product, to hear the things that work really well and maybe some of the stuff that could be improved, right? But I would say it's more about object thinking rather than sort of spatial thinking. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. Yeah, with that, this is a little more of an observation, but I'm reminded of some of the lessons of Eliel Saarinen back in the day. So Eliel, he designed this campus. He was the first director of the school, and a lot of the classic mid-century giants that came out of here, Knoll, Eames, Bertoia, and Arrow, they often pointed to this idea that they said they learned from Arrow was that for whatever design project you're working on, you should always be looking at the next smaller scale and the next larger scale of it. And so if you're designing a chair, you should be thinking about the body and thinking about the scale of the room. If you're designing a room, you should look at the scale of the furniture and the scale of the building. If you're designing a building, you should look at the scale of the room and the site, and so on, all the way up to, I guess, the city. And so, but it's just, this idea of having the flexibility to kind of think across all those different contexts. And I see that, someone like yourself is a continuation of that way of thinking, of being a great industrial designer, but being able to understand space. And so I think about some of those design giants, for like the furniture we're sitting in right now, that they were completely informed by that way of thinking. And I mean, a lot of it had to do with that moment in time, trying to design for modern architecture. So modern architecture comes along. There's this whole new language of steel and glass buildings, open plan, and all of that heavy, overstuffed Victorian furniture language. It wasn't appropriate for that spatial idea. And so all this classic mid-century stuff was a response to like a new spatial need. And I don't know, it's just more of an observation, like that lineage of like what made those designers great is that they were thinking about that. They were not just great industrial designers. You look at like the Eames studio, like Charles was trained as an architect, and Ray came from painting, but like being able to move between these different scales, I think, I guess I'm just trying to sort of relate to your expertise as sort of being in that lineage. And
Thank you.
and from being being in the field, I think that that sensibility is rare. I know a lot of great industrial designers. I know a lot of great interior designers, but when you put the two together, I think it's a special mix.
Well, thanks. That's very, very flattering. Thank you. As you were saying, the idea of sort of working backwards in larger scale and that sensibility, I think we also have to think about, and this is powers of 10, right? Of getting then down to the smaller scale, right? And I think that's where, so like I was a frustrated architect who couldn't hack the math, right? So interior design was like my entry point into doing architecture light, right? Interiors. And I worked with a lot of architects who were trained as architects who did incredible interiors. And they were so good at it because they could drill down into the materials and the details and the proportions, right? And that's what I love about what I do, is because I can think about the objects working in a space and what that means, but I could also get into the pole. I can get into the knob, And one of the things that I think is different about interior designers and industrial designers is interior designers don't necessarily have the opportunity to cut into everything that gets built and understand how it gets made and how it gets put together. And I've had to learn that, and I've really grown to love that, if that makes sense, right? I love having the constraints of, well, it's going to have to be at a 3/4 inch plywood, and we're going to have to buy out these casters, and we're going to have to do these other things. So, Brian, you really haven't got a lot of wiggle room. Oh, no, I got plenty of wiggle room. That's my sweet spot. I want to have constraints and parameters, and then I want to get into those things and use those methods and means to craft something that hopefully has just a little twist or a little special detail, and sometimes it's just a drawer pull, right? Or it's just a little anklet on a leg that can be the difference between something else and what I try to create.
Yeah, I think of how industrial designers are trained to partly be makers. Do you think of yourself as a maker?
I make trouble.
Or where does making fit into your process?
It really doesn't, and I think it's really important to understand. I mean, I understand we have a lot of the same friends and colleagues who have shops, who that's a part of their process. And in some ways, I wish I had that, right? Because I think I could get to a certain level maybe easier. But my practice is built on working with manufacturing partners who take on the prototyping challenges and want to. And it's fine with me. I think that's fine. But then that means that my deliverables have to be even more specific if I'm going to get close to what I intend. But then I always know whenever I get there, it's going to evolve, and we're going to do it together, right?
So I know that craft is important to you, but so how does craft happen if you're not the person with your hands on the material?
I think it goes back to seeking first to understand, and then maybe to be understood. I think that was Stephen Covey said that a long time ago. And I think that's really smart. It's like I want to know how they put things together. I want to see what they feel they are really good at. And that's been more of a challenge these days because of more and more people outsourcing things, right? But most of the companies I work with still make the majority of their product. And so it starts with a factory tour, and then it literally goes into having discussions with engineers and manufacturing guys early on. So this Ally product that we just introduced, I probably spent 2 hours with the two heads of manufacturing telling me the things that I was proposing that were going to be trouble, that were truly going to be a challenge for them. And the marketing people are like, well, you can do it. It's like, let's listen, right? I'm going to respect that. And the product evolved, it changed, but it was for the right reasons, right? It makes no sense for me to design something that doesn't flow through a factory efficiently, right? It's just going to be a pain point. Ultimately, they're going to resent it. They're going to have to price it too high. It's not going to sell. And then nobody's happy. So I want to first understand what they're good at, how they do what they do. And in some cases, then I'll learn, like with that seaming on the chair. You know, if we did this more curved seam, that would be easier for us to pattern match. Wait a minute, that looks more interesting than the straight seam I planned. Let's do that. Great.
Yeah, I found that too as a designer that I don't need to be able to execute on every technique, but I need to understand the techniques, and then I need to work with experts who are the experts who can do those techniques.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's more of a kind of typical industrial design posture, you know. Yeah. So thinking more about interior design and industrial design, I was thinking about behaviors. So industrial designers are very concerned with understanding people's behaviors, but a lot of times it's the behavior of the user, you know, one user, one object maybe. And interior design has to kind of zoom out to the organizational level, which is a different set of behaviors. And so I don't know. I was wondering if you could just talk about some of that difference. It's another sort of difference in scale of thinking, but yeah, where does that difference kind of fit in for you?
Yeah, workplaces for sure. We're already questioning the way that they were functioning before the pandemic. Now, everything's open. It's all on the table. Well, could be a table, could be a chair. And so we're all struggling with how does furniture react? How does it sponsor the things that we need the workplace to do? And I think that understanding those kind of cultural impact of what you do is important. I mentioned this earlier, and I think this is related to what you asked. Because of the desire to have more flexibility in the workplace, to be able to accommodate multiple uses and multiple needs with lots of different stakeholders. The furniture is now tasked with being extraordinarily agile, right? Flexible. And as you know, that typically leads to cost. If something's going to start to morph or hinge or pivot, that's expensive, right? So how can we sort of strike that balance between maybe smaller pieces that are more easily removed and reconfigured by the end users themselves? You know, a group to reconfigure the space for lunch then becomes a place where we can have some clients in and give a presentation, and then it switches over again, and then we're going to have like a reception at 3:30 or 4 o'clock or something, right? I think those are really interesting challenges. Furniture carries a lot of that burden.
Yeah, and I think about culture too, like the organizational culture. So, like you were describing some of your wood case goods for Knoll as being for law offices, and that it's partly about an aesthetic, but it's expressing the values of the company, and it seems like a more interior design level of thinking. What's the culture of the company?
Yeah, and I mean, because I've done so many case goods lines over the years, right? I think what's really interesting about that is that you know, executives and lawyers, a lot of people are being repurposed. It's a nice way to say it. Challenged, right? And so wood and that furniture might be one of the few examples of decorum and status they have left, right? Something tactile that they can say, I'm digital everywhere, I'm virtual in a lot of cases, but when it comes down to it, this means I've made it. Does that make sense, right? And so I don't really try to get all caught up in that when I'm designing, obviously, but I think what's really interesting is to then walk through these spaces and see the installation and see how people react to the furniture and what they think about it and the feedback that they give. It's just fascinating.
Yeah. So you spoke a bit about how relationships are important for you in industry, and I thought about this a lot myself, especially as an educator, and seeing, you know, at this point I've taught over 150 students coming through here, and emphasizing to people how important relationships are. That you can be the most talented designer in the world, but if you can't build relationships, your talent is not going to be realized. And so I was wondering, what would you suggest to a young designer to sort of build those muscles in to establish relationships?
Wow, that's a good one. I'm thinking of my favorite scene from the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, right, where Alec Baldwin is talking about ABC, right? Always be closing. Always be closing. Coffee's for closers. Love that movie.
Sales. I mean, he was talking about sales.
It's sales.
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of I don't want to get into sales, man, you know?
Yeah.
You are selling to the person that hires you, the person that works with you, your team, in some form, right? You're not trying to coerce anybody. You're not trying to put something over on them. You're advocating for a position or an idea, right? And what I think is really rich about that is figuring out how to navigate that. I don't see it as politics. I just see it as learning how to deal with people. I think one of the things that I've noticed from my education and through exposure to a lot of students is the sort of singular nature that education demands of them. You've got to be chief cook and bottle washer on every project. You've got to learn how to do all of it. And then what you don't realize is when you get out and you start working for a firm, you're going to be a part of a team, right? And so I really feel like design is a team sport, right? You've got to learn how to play with all these different folks. They each have skills and capabilities, and that's just internal, right? Then you're going to have to work with people that don't have the language and lexicon of design at their fingertips, who need to be sold or need to understand what you're trying to do from a business perspective. My late father, God bless him, when I graduated, besides giving me a set of matched luggage, which is really a great thing to say, out the door, he also gave me a subscription to Fortune magazine, which is a great title for a magazine, right? And his idea was, look, you're steeped in design, you're all into that, it's great. You need to have an understanding of how business thinks, the terms they use, the things that they talk about, that they care about. And boy, was he right. That has served me very, very well to understand business.
So you and I are of a era and generation where we've seen a lot of change in our lives. You know, like I think we both started out in design using T-squares and
I remember those.
yeah, and drafting tables and
Yeah.
actually, you know, drawing by hand. But to think about all that change, what do you see as advantages that young designers have that you didn't have?
Oh, wow. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I think it's some advantages and maybe some potential disadvantages or pitfalls. They have access to knowledge and information that we had to go to the library, if they had the book, that we could check out and look at, right? That's not the case anymore, right? The world's at their fingertips. So access to that kind of information is fantastic. Flip side of that is a lot of noise. What's the signal, right? But I think designers are particularly good at separating that stuff and finding out what's important, right? I mean, that's what we do. We synthesize a bunch of disparate information into sort of a cohesive idea or line of thought, right? And so the challenges are, how do you get past Pinterest and Google Images and mood boards and find meaning, right? I remember going to a class where there was a crit with a few other people, and part of the concept that this teacher had was, and they can't use Pinterest or Google Image for anything that they're showing. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the cat is totally out of the bag. That you should allow them to do it. The trick is to limit them to a certain number of images and then to show me what they have done to synthesize those images into their own thing, right? Mm-hmm. Collage, it doesn't have to be a drawing or it could be anything, right? But show me the synthesis, because that's what we're asking them to do, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We have access to so much. Well, the noise and signal idea seems essential now. So I hear from a lot of young people a general sense of criticality and unease with capitalism, and and young people being critical of capitalism, and they should be. And capitalism, there are parts of capitalism that are a mess. You know, we are subjected to, and we are a part of big systems that we have no control over, and a lot of them are broken. But what's your take on that from the perspective of a designer? And this is a big, broad question, but.
So, Scott, I'd like to call my lifeline question. Well, I guess I'm a capitalist. I'm for capitalism. Yeah, it's an imperfect system. The world's an imperfect place, right? One of the reasons we exist as designers is to try to make the world hopefully a better place, more just place, right? I guess what I'll say is designers, and this is happening up and down the food chain, from architects to urban planners, landscape architects, interior designers, industrial designers, that there's more and more stakeholders and more concerns that are really valid. DEI, sustainability, EDG, I mean, all these, a lot of acronyms. And so that just is more stuff to synthesize. That's more stuff that I feel like people are saying and asking for. Make sense of this. Give this meaning. Tell me what to pay attention to. Tell me how we should spend our money, right? We've got a budget, and we need to spend it responsibly. And what I love about a lot of the students that I talked to today is they're feeling like they want to make sure that what they're developing and what they're coming up with has meaning, has a purpose, has a role, right, in the world. We don't really need, I shouldn't say this, we don't really need another chair, right? Probably not. And yet, we work for companies who rely on new products to keep factories open, to feed families, to deliver results. And so I'm okay with that. And I think we should be okay with that. We'll just try to do it in the most responsible way we can.
Yeah, maybe to just rephrase that a little bit, the way you were saying that there are a number of different problems that designers are being asked to synthesize, and these are cultural problems. And I've always thought of the designer as a cultural agent. That like we are we're the filter through between business and the people. And if we're doing our job well, then we can make a big impact through that, or affect some change, even if it's incremental. But yeah, man. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we take some questions from the audience? I feel like we went from the micro to the macro. So in the back, Kevin, I'll restate your question. So.
Okay. Thank you for coming in your presentation. I'm the curator of historic collections at Cranbrook, and I'm wondering what the life cycle of your products are, and what you think the life cycle should be, because Cranbrook has a disastrous tapestry of Knoll, Steelcase, Herman Miller, and random Chinese brands from Amazon in our classrooms, and the plastic stuff just breaks. It doesn't matter if it's a Steelcase rolly chair or if it's Herman Miller. I mean, the surfaces degrade. And so I can go into a classroom like 7th graders, middle school for boys yesterday. We were starting the classroom. I say, okay, what do you want to start with? They say, how old is this table? And I'm like, maybe 5 years old. What is it made of? We tap it, we knock on it, we go under it, we look at it, and I'm like, it's essentially paper, glue, plastic, and a few bolts. And then we turn around and we look at a wooden table from 1927, and it's doing great. And I have all this furniture that was purchased from Stickley Brothers that is in perfect shape. And it's really not even the environmental aspect of it. I'm gay, I'm not gonna have kids burn. No, that is part of it, like, what are we creating? But it's also just like, these rooms. I really love your product that you with the wall, and you said it was weird, but there's kind of like nothing weird on the screen. I want there to be more weird. I want some folk art thrown at it, but I also want something that like could get stained or burned or be refinished. And I just, how does it last? And what do you view time and seasonality in like the glint of sunlight on these very beautiful products.
For the recording, that was a long question. It's essentially about the question about the life cycle of your designs and both enduring physical and cultural value. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think the good thing about what I do and the companies that I work with is that everything that we do is warranted for between 5 and 15 years. And they stand behind that. Now, you might think 5 years is not that long, and it probably isn't, but that's more for upholstered furniture that ultimately is going to end up being reupholstered. I'm trying to work with people to design smarter in saying we need to be able to recover the furniture, let's say, to reupholster the furniture in a way that it's almost like a take-back program. You redo it and then send it back out. Now, there's a cost associated with that you hope that the end user buys into as a program, but most of everything that we design can last a lot longer than it typically does. And I think a lot of that is just driven by a desire for new, some level of fashion, what have you. I couldn't speak to the products that you're talking about. I don't think I've designed any of them, so that's good.
And it's not wrong, it's more the attitude that when you see a wooden chair in a historic style, you think, I'm not going to throw that away. And so how could it encourage, like all this product does look like it would wear, and the wooden stuff is so beautiful, and I would want to fix that. But in a disposable society, do you think that there's a way for the designer to, when these hospitals and bigger companies get rid of the stuff, instead of calling it dumpster, that it goes down into another place?
We are working on that, I think, as an industry really hard, because I think our end users and facilities people, and quite frankly, the people that are occupying our spaces are demanding that from us. I'm working right now as a thesis advisor for San Jose State University. Go Spartans. Right, see, mascots again, right? And one of the aspects of their design brief as senior students is to design furniture that is designed to be repaired by the person that bought it and used it. So that mentality is already at the academic level, I think. And we're employing some very talented, deep-thinking sustainability experts to help us navigate a lot of that stuff. So it's not a perfect answer to your question, but I just want to say I think that environmental sustainability, things that last longer are first and foremost upfront as a part of the purchasing decision for furniture now that wasn't necessarily there 5 or 6 years ago. And I think the last thing I'll say about it is, in my mind, good, timeless design is in and of itself sustainable, right? If you design something that's not about fashion or trends, then if it's built correctly, it ought to survive far beyond what you would normally associate.
Thanks, Kevin. Other questions? Anyone?
Well, I just wondered, most of your the talk is about your furniture. I wonder if you could talk about some of your ideas on interior design, how you approach a space, how you relate to architecture, and the materiality of the designs.
Well, to be honest, I sort of stopped practicing interior design a while ago as a matter of trying to keep my sanity. And the reason why is because as I went off on my own, I did showrooms for a long time for some of my manufacturing partners, but that's such a different practice, and there's such a different demand for being aware of all the materials and textiles and everything that's new. And I just realized that I wasn't built for that anymore. I didn't have the facilities or, quite frankly, the bandwidth to do that. So I don't really practice interiors. I haven't for probably 10 years now. The thing that I'm really excited about with interiors, though, and my friends and colleagues that I keep in touch with and I work with and look at, is there's still a really, really interesting idea that there's no one right style, there's no one right approach, and there's no one, this is the way it should be. There's an openness now, I think. There's an embrace of true materiality in terms of richness, but also, again, in terms of sustainability. And I think you're seeing some really interesting form making, especially at the architectural level, that I find really encouraging. It used to be, I think Frank Gehry had a hard time with the ripped models, turning those into like built buildings, right? Because the technology wasn't there to support that. Now I think the technology has come a long way. And so I'm excited about the future for space making and form giving in that area.
Do you see a lot of convergence happening in the different market verticals? So typical market verticals are workplace, hospitality, healthcare, education. Are those kinds of spaces becoming more the same, do you think?
Yeah, I think there is some overlap, and I think part of it is because people that were practicing corporate architecture or corporate interiors are wanting to diversify their practices, and so they're moving into those areas, and so they're bringing those sensibilities into those spaces, right? And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do healthcare more, because I felt like I was seeing and hearing more, frankly, modern designers wanting to do those kinds of spaces because they felt that they were appropriate and that timelessness was something they wanted to bring to that market. So yeah, I think there's quite a lot of overlap in that area. I think you're also seeing, obviously, a lot of hospitality orientation coming back into not only healthcare, but also to workplace. I was just in the Gensler offices in San Francisco, their headquarters, that they relaunched. And they're in 5 days a week, and they love it. And the reason they love it is because the first quarter of it, which is a substantial space, is like a very high-end happening hotel lobby. You're asked if you want an espresso, which I always seem to want an espresso, Scott. I don't know what that's about. But they're giving tours, people are working, they're having meetings, there's a social aspect to it, and they're basically walking the talk about why the office is an important place for people to come back and work and be together. So I think that's a really exciting trend that I'm seeing more and more people embracing.
Yeah, that's what I've seen too. Hospitality seems to be the overlap that both in workplace, in education, and you mentioned the hospital. I mean the hotel lobby. We're seeing more university libraries that are trying to look and feel more like a hotel lobby, or hospital waiting rooms. A lot of it, and airports. Now at airports that you have all the same kind of typologies. You have like some of the long tables for more social gathering. You've got desk height places for heads down, mostly work, for active waiting, as they say. People bring in their laptops, wanting to get work done while they're waiting. And we're seeing these typologies kind of showing up in all these different contexts. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on what you just said. I think that there's this, I've always kind of felt like there's analogies or metaphors to these kinds of places. I think of the student union, right, as this place where a lot of these kinds of different functions happen, right? I think of airport clubs, right, and lounge spaces where the desire is for all of these different experiences to happen. And I guess the thing I'm excited about for those is the furniture is the primary form of activating those spaces, right? the way the furniture is arrayed. Obviously, lighting has and some materiality, but the furniture is really the tool that makes a space function one way or another, right? That gives you the visual cues. It has the semantics that say, work here, relax here, recline here, right?
Right.
And that's an exciting place to be from a furniture perspective.
Maybe it's about choice. Like really, we want more choices in how we're going to inhabit space. I think there's a level of comfort that comes from that. Like when you walk into a room, like, well, kind of like this, where all the seating is prescribed, you have one choice for how you're going to inhabit space. But when you walk into a space where you have a lot more choices, there's some comfort to that. You know?
Absolutely, and I think that we're seeing now this desire, this demand from people for choice. I think a few years ago there was this sense, well, let's go back to the office. The office is where we can schedule the time to be together. Well, I don't know anybody who can basically schedule 8 hours of being together. They're going to need an hour to prep, maybe a half an hour to do something else, make a phone call. And so by the very nature of the way that humans are, they have to have choice. They have to have a range of expression, a range of capabilities. And again, I think the furniture is the thing that signals that, supports that.
So I know we're running a little bit late. I want to thank you, Brian, for everything today. It was a whirlwind day, I know, and it's not done yet. We're gonna have dinner in the studio.
Thank you. No, I'm really so happy to be here. We talked about this a little bit this morning. Cranbrook is the place I probably would not have gotten into had I applied. So I'm so happy to have had a chance to come here.
It's not too late. It's not too late.
I'll be the oldest graduate student ever. No? Oh, darn. No, this has been an absolute delight, and this is checking one off the bucket list for me, folks. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone, for coming.